Alright guys, so what you'll need in this recipe, we're actually doing 3 6-inch pans of cake to make a layered cake. It is my son's 5th birthday on Tuesday, so we're prepping the cake a day before just because it makes icing easier. However, he is going to have a bigger cake that I'm going to make later on in the week when it's closer to his birthday party on Saturday. So this one we're just going to do half of a recipe of 3 9-inch cakes. So if you want 3 9-inch cakes, then you can just double this recipe and that's what it's going to give you. So first we have kosher salt. It usually calls for 1 teaspoon, so we're going to do half a teaspoon. Baking powder usually is 2 teaspoons, so we're going to go ahead and do 1 teaspoon. I usually do 2 tablespoons of vanilla, so we're going to do 1 tablespoon of vanilla. And then the baking soda is usually 1 teaspoon, so we're going to do a half a teaspoon. We're going to use 1 3/4 stick of butter, softened. Use 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk. And then we're going to do 2 cups of flour. Now, the recipe does call for cake flour, so just to make cake flour, what you do is you can put the 2 cups of flour in here, and per cup you just remove 1 tablespoon of flour and add in 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. Mix it together and it's just as good as cake flour. So the first thing we're going to actually do is mix in all our dry ingredients in this separate bowl. So that's anything that's not like a liquid or a sugar, so that will be your dry ingredients. So in this bowl we're going to add in our flour. Then we're going to add in our baking soda, our kosher salt, and our baking powder. With a whisk, I'm just going to go ahead and mix that up. And make sure it's nice and evenly mixed. I'm going to set that aside. Next, with my KitchenAid, I am going to whip in the white sugar right here and the butter. And then we're going to do that until it's a creamy consistency. Just going to whip the butter just a little bit first. And then add the sugar. Just going to stop it for a second and just scrape down the sides. And just by scraping the sides, just make sure that everything is evenly mixed together. Before I put in the next ingredients, I am going to preheat the oven. I'm going to preheat the oven to about 360 degrees. While that warms up, I'm going to move on to the next steps. So the next steps I did forget to mention is we are going to use 3 eggs. Please keep in mind the eggs, the buttermilk, and the butter do have to be in room temperature for the recipes to come out like they should. I'm not too sure if you use cold eggs if that actually makes a difference, but I always make sure the room temperature. If they're not room temperature, I just put them in a little bit of warm water for a few minutes, and that usually brings them down in temperature. So we're just going to do 2 eggs, and 1 egg white. So this part you got to be careful because you don't want the yolk to get in there, so, or the shells. So I just like to basically toss it back and forth until all the egg whites are in there. Like that. Perfect. And then again, we're just going to beat it all together. I'm going to scrape down the sides to make sure the eggs, the sugar, and the butter all mixed together. Pretty good. And at this point, we do want it a liquidy consistency, and basically the flour mixture will go ahead and thicken it up when it's ready. It should look really smooth. Something like that. And then the next step we're going to do is we're going to add in the vanilla while we're mixing it. I'm going to put it on a little bit of a faster speed. It should look a little chunky, but that's okay. That's because the eggs are mixing with the butter. So what we're gonna do is scrape down the sides. And we're gonna start adding in our flour mixture. So I'm just gonna put just a little bit in, because you don't want flour all over, because this mixer and any hand mixer really will actually spread the flour across the countertop, and that has happened to me when I added in a little too much. So I like to start off with a slow speed, and then as it's mixing in, I like to just bring it to like a 2. And then when it's all mixed in, I like to bring it to like a 4 to 6. And since that's mixed up, I don't want flour in my face, so I'm just going to go ahead, lift this up again, and then put the remaining amount of flour in there. Make sure this is locked down because it will like bump. And again, start with mixing slow. Once it starts to mix in together, we can go ahead and move it a little bit faster. I'm going to stop it really quickly. And again, I'm going to scrape down the sides of the bowl. Like so. And then give it one more mix. Okay, after that's done mixing, we want to keep the mixer on low, and we just want to start pouring in the buttermilk. And we're going to do that little by little so it can mix in evenly. Once that's mixed in, give it another little scrape to make sure everything is equivalent. If you don't have buttermilk, you can use room temperature whole milk. It just has to be full fat. I particularly like the buttermilk just because it keeps the cake moist longer because of all the fat that is in there. That means my oven is ready. And let's just give it one more mix. What I do is I like to taste a little bit of the batter. I just get a spoon, and I know a lot of people would say you don't do that because it has raw eggs, but a little bit of raw eggs is not going to kill me. So I just take about a little tab like that just to taste it, to make sure it tastes like vanilla cake, to make sure the batter tastes good. And if not, adjust the recipe, but this one is pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead and scrape all this off of here. So next we're going to prepare the pan. This is a 6-inch pan. I do have a cake liner at the bottom. It just helps when you dump it out to cool down on the cooling rack. It stops it from fully sticking on the bottom. And then spray it with this. It's called Baker's Joy. And it's a non-stick spray with flour, so you don't have to flour this after you spray it. And then for this, I just put a generous amount. I'm going to make sure it's fully covered. And then I'm going to take like a soup serving spoon. And then we're just going to put a couple spoons in here. That. And make sure there's no air bubbles in the cake. I just like to beat it against the countertop. This will ensure that your cake will come out as flat as possible. If you do have an air bubble, it can make the cake a little bit lumpy, even though we're going to trim the top off of the cake before we decorate it. Fill it about halfway through the pan. This is a 6-inch pan by 2 inches. So I like to fill it up about an inch. And then I'm going to go ahead and stick it in the oven. Typically, if it was a 9-inch pan, the cook time would be roughly 30 minutes or so. But since this is a smaller pan, I'm going to put it in for 20. Since this is a smaller pan, I am going to put it in for 20 minutes. Just because it's 3 inches smaller than your average 9-inch, just to make sure that the cake doesn't burn. I'm going to put it on the middle rack in the middle of the oven. I'm going to do it 2 more times after this because I only have one 6-inch pan. So I'm going to do it 3 times in total to make a 3-layer 6-inch cake. And then once they're all made, I'll come back and we can go ahead and decorate them together. Alright guys, so after we cool the cakes down all the way, I actually made them yesterday. Today we're working on the buttercream icing. And this is just a recipe I found online. Alright, so today we're going to go ahead and make the buttercream icing for the cake. So we're going to need 1.5 cups of butter, 4 cups of powdered sugar, teaspoon of salt, about a tablespoon of vanilla, and about 3 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream. And again, we're going to first start off with whipping the butter and the salt. So I'm just going to whip the butter really quickly at a fast pace. And then I'm going to add in the salt. And we're going to whip that again. After that, we're just going to go ahead and put a little bit of powdered sugar. Again, this is something that we want to do, we want to do in proportion just so it doesn't fly everywhere. That probably is going to make it fly everywhere because powdered sugar is very light. And scrape the bowl just to make sure all the powdered sugar is being mixed in with the icing. So we're going to basically trim the cakes that we made. Tried to get the sticker off. Did not work. So we'll have to save that for later. So we got a little board because we're going to basically stick it on top of here and then stack the cake on it. I like to have options when I'm applying the icing. So I have a couple flat ones, a long one, a smaller one, another flat one, and then like a curved one. So I'm going to first start off by taking a little bit of icing before we cut the cake, and we're just going to stick it down here. This basically helps the cake to stick so that it doesn't slide around. So like that, and then we're gonna go ahead and set that to the side. We're gonna start by trimming the cake. Do have a large bread knife right here. It has like little teeth. That's what you'll need to get a good cut. I'm gonna cut off the top because that's the least firm spot. And basically you just put your hand on top, be careful with the knife, and you just cut above that rounded area. Like this. And then take off this piece. I like to put it to the side. And then I make sure this is an even surface. So I'll go over it again like this. I'll start by putting this here. Next, I'm going to take this flat one and I'm going to take some of the icing and I'm just going to go ahead and put it on top of here. Just basically get a good amount of icing on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a thin layer on top since this is the top cake. And this layer is called the crumb layer. So basically the icing collects all the crumbs. Just move it to the edge. Very daring, but for some reason this doesn't hold as well as the plastic one that I have. So just going I'm just gonna fill this. All right, and then I'm just going to stick this in the fridge for about 10 minutes. So it can get a little hard, but that's what the crumb layer looks like. All right, so I whipped the buttercream a little bit because buttercream tends to get a little stiff, as you would say, when sitting out. I let it sit in the fridge until the icing is hard, so it's hard to touch. I'm just gonna go ahead and do another layer. I am gonna start by doing the top. This. And getting closest to the bottom and top as possible. And I'm just going to flatly put it against it and just run it around. And I'm just going so this is what it's looking like. Not super perfect, but good enough because it's not actually his birthday cake. It's actually just, well, it is a birthday cake, but it's not for his party. This is just for at home. And I'm just trying to get this as even as possible on this new board. Take this piping thing and I'm putting sprinkles as decoration down the bottom. So all I'm gonna do is just squeeze the bottom. Doesn't have to be perfect because, again, I'm putting sprinkles down there. I'm just gonna pat the green on the top. Okay. Just gonna try and put an indent, and then I'm gonna put some icing right there, and then that. I'm just gonna put 2 Roblox guys here and here. So we have this little toy. Yes, it's clean. We're gonna put it right here. And then we're gonna take this little Roblox guy, which is like a little ninja. And then, looks like that.